In his world of progress and technology, man convinces himself that there's nothing out there, nothing moving in the shadows beyond the arc of his peripheral vision, nothing in the light taking account of his deeds and actions. In this podcast, we will discuss the paranormal, hauntings, spirituality, all things between the darkness and the light, angels, demons, the universe within, and the universe without. I'm Paul James Caiden, and this is The Spirit Side. Many have claimed over the centuries to see visions of heaven, hell, and the afterlife. Some say they have had near-death experiences after brushes with death and have been taken to a heavenly realm or saw glimpses of a terrible place of burning fire and tormented souls. Others claim that they have been visited by a heavenly being, a saint, an angel, a prophet, or even Jesus himself, who gave them a personal tour of the afterlife, its glories and its horrors. In this episode, we will explore some of these claims and ask ourselves, is there any reality to any of this? Or is it all just imagination? I'm Paul James Caiden, and this is The Spirit Side. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We have an interesting show today on a topic that I think a lot of people are very interested in, and that is visions of heaven, hell, the afterlife. What happens when we die? Do we have any information, real information, or clues as to what happens when we leave this world? Some have absolute faith that when the physical body dies, that the spirit or the consciousness will go on to live in some other dimension of life, and the thought of death doesn't bother them at all. Yet there are some who are not so sure. So leaving the mortal coil, as we say, can be a bit of a scary thought for them and invoke feelings of stress, anxiety, and fear. But the reality of the matter is that there is more to this near-death experience than most people believe there is. Science or medical science would have us believe it is nothing more than the hallucinations of a dying brain being starved of oxygen. But those who really study the near-death experience, and I mean study, people who are doctors, scientists, neurosurgeons, quantum physicists. There are institutes where people actually study this phenomenon because they believe there is more to it than meets the eye. And certainly there is, because there is a lot there that cannot be explained. And this is people who have been pronounced clinically dead for a number of minutes, some very short, some for actually quite an extended period of time. And then they come back with no brain damage, no ill effects of the organs or the brain being starved of blood and oxygen for such a period of time that one would think it would be impossible for them to revive, let alone revive and have all of their faculties about them. But these people explain seeing a wonderful heavenly realm, being greeted by loved ones, relatives, radiant beings with glowing, beautiful blue eyes who they described as being angels, that took them into the light and through the tunnel that we all hear about in the near-death experience. And on the other side was beautiful landscapes, flowers, mountains, colors they've never seen before, music and notes that they've never heard before on earth. They were greeted by friends and loved ones who have passed before them. And they say that this experience is more real than their life on earth. And when they revive, they say they no longer have any fear of death because they know there is another world, a more real world, right next to ours. But there's also those who say they have taken the journey outside of the body during a near-death experience and saw their loved ones at home or their loved ones in the waiting room if they were undergoing a surgical procedure. And they could tell verbatim exactly what their loved ones were doing, what they were saying. What happened if a doctor or nurse went into the room and said, the operation didn't go well or we've lost them. So how could a mind or a brain that is completely dead and devoid of life and oxygen possibly know what was said between a doctor and a nurse, loved ones in a waiting room, what book someone was reading, what color socks someone was wearing at that time? All of these strange little details have come through in near-death and out-of-body experiences when people have at least temporarily passed away. And I, for one, do believe, after making a study of this for many years, I personally began studying the near-death experience probably in the spring of 1991. And it's something that I've continued to read about and study and look up and see what the latest research is bringing about. And I do believe that there is something to this. This is not pie in the sky. This is not something that is being made up for gain by the person who experiences it. Doctors and nurses who may not have any belief system at all are continually shocked by what these people say when they open their eyes and return from the realm of death or the realm of beyond. And it is also interesting to note that the near-death experience is something that has existed throughout time immemorial, or even deathbed visions. From ancient Egypt, China, all around the world throughout the ages, people on their deathbeds or people who have passed away and then came back and were revived somehow miraculously, as those around them say, have all described the same thing. A light in the room, or a light in the corner of the room, this light growing brighter. Friends and relatives, loved ones, and radiant angelic beings standing in the room near the bed, telling the person who is passing, "Come with us, you're okay. Right this way, there's nothing to fear." Now, there may be some little variations in the near-death experience or the deathbed vision, depending on culture, but the phenomenon is basically the same in its details. So the question I've always asked throughout the years is, if the near-death experience or the deathbed vision are just the hallucinations of a dying brain, then why does everyone throughout the ages hallucinate or dream almost the same thing? I mean, we're all individuals. Wouldn't we hallucinate or see very different things depending on our life experiences, beliefs, or lack of beliefs? Why would it always be the same details? The light in the corner of the room, the light near the ceiling, the deceased loved ones, the relatives, the angels, going through the tunnel. This would be like saying we go to bed at night and everyone dreams the same dream. Now that would certainly be something that all of us, even science, would look at, I believe, and say, that's something pretty amazing. We need to look into this. Yet with the near-death experience, many are silent as to why this same phenomenon would be experienced by people over and over and over again. But not all people see a heavenly, blissful, loving, and wonderful vision when they pass away temporarily or have a near-death experience. Some claim that they see hell, the fiery pits of tormented souls and demons torturing those who did not make it into heaven because they were sinners, they did bad things, or they didn't have the right religion at the time of their passing. I remember one individual who I'll just call John, whose near-death experience I watched on YouTube, and then I went to a website that he has. And he claims that he had a near-death experience in the mid-1980s, I believe it was. And upon his passing, he found himself being not going up into the light, but rather falling down through the floor and going down into this very dark place. And he found himself in the midst of hell. And he saw all these souls crying out for mercy and being tormented in the flames. And one person that he noticed, he was very frightened, and he was looking for a way out of this place. He was praying, he was crying out to God to get him out of this place. He wasn't necessarily a believer in any religion at that time, but he saw this one individual with very long, dark hair being tortured severely in the flames. And this man looked at John from the fiery pit, and he introduced himself as being Buddha. And he told John, I am in this place because I did not follow or believe in the true Lord of glory, Jesus Christ, when I died. Now, there are a lot of near-death experiences that say things like this that come from religious people or people who found religion. But the question I would ask is, would the afterlife be so spurious or messy with their timeline? I mean, Buddha lived some 500 years before Jesus Christ, so how could he believe and follow him if he'd never heard of him? And sadly, the Christian religion is replete with such near-death experience accounts. And perhaps some of these people did have some kind of experience. Maybe there was something that they hallucinated, or maybe some of them are just simply making it up. Because most of these individuals have websites that you can donate money to, or buy their books or their tapes, or more information on their time spent in hell, or visions of the Christ that they've had. And to me, it's always very sad that people need to do things like this in order to take a beautiful faith like Christianity and pervert it and lie about it in order to scare people in supporting their movement or their business or their published material. But certainly for me, I always do a little bit of homework on these things, and most of these near-death experiences where someone is going to hell and seeing someone like Buddha or whomever saying that they're there because they rejected Jesus, it's a clear giveaway that this is a hoax, because again, if someone lived 500 years before Christ, how could he believe in or follow someone who was never on the earth until many centuries later? So we certainly do have to look out for the hoaxers and the liars and the tall tale tellers out there when it comes to the near-death experience. And we'll talk more about this right after this short break. Welcome back to the show, everyone. And let's continue with our exploration of visions of heaven, hell, and the afterlife. Televangelist Jesse Duplantis wrote a book in the early 90s entitled Close Encounters of the Heavenly Kind, where he claims he asked God every night to show himself to Jesse. Show me yourself, show me heaven. Till finally one night, God got so tired of Jesse Duplantis asking him to show himself that he did. There was a great wind that blew in the room while Jesse Duplantis was sleeping next to his wife. A wind so strong and a wind so strange that he could feel it blowing underneath his fingernails. And then following this strange visitation from God, Jesse Duplantis was taken up into heaven in something that almost revealed a spaceship or a rocket ship. And there he met King David, the Apostle Paul, and many other saints and angels. He saw the tree of life and the streets of gold. And at one point, Jesse Duplantis claims that he even had a little bit of a competition with the Apostle Paul, like, hey, Paul, you've really got nothing on me because I'm a great man of the Word of Faith movement. So these are certainly, again, some fantastic tales coming from people who are not necessarily honest or telling the truth. I mean, this individual was or is a televangelist. He has been for many years. And someone who knows a little something about that movement and that particular group, I am fully aware how they will make up stories and change facts, once again, to get people to believe in them, follow their ministry, donate to their ministry, buy their books and their tapes. So books such as Close Encounters of the Heavenly Kind by Jesse Duplantis, I really think are more works of fraud and fiction rather than glimpses of a true afterlife. There's also another popular set of books that were quite hot among religious folks in the mid-latter 90s by an author by the name of Mary Baxter. And she wrote two books. One was called A Divine Revelation of Hell, and another called A Divine Revelation of Heaven. Now, Mary Baxter claims in her book that Jesus came to her personally in the night and wanted to show her visions of heaven and hell so she could write these books and tell of the reality of these places to those who are on the earth. Now, I heard a lot of scuttlebutt at that time in the probably the latter part of the 90s about this book. So I took it upon myself to buy a copy and read A Divine Revelation of Hell. I must say, for me, this book made me very uncomfortable. It felt very heavy. It felt very negative. It felt like it came from someone's dark imagination rather than a divine revelation. Now, this is not the place or the time in this podcast to talk about all rewards being the same in the afterlife. As some believe, we can live our lives any way we want and we all go to the same place. We get a pat on the back. Everything's okay. Come on in. I don't personally believe that that is true. I believe you do reap what you sow. I believe you give what you get, and or rather get what you give. And, at the very least, I think we have to do some learning in the afterlife if our lives were not lived in a very good manner. But in Mary Baxter's book, she says she is taken through hell and shown these deep, terrible inner bowels of hell. And in one of them, there were Christians who were burning and suffering. And they said they were crying out to Jesus for mercy, saying, Lord, please take me out of this place. I believed in you. I was a Christian, but I had a good career and I was a little too focused on money and finances and a little too greedy and materialistic. And this is what got me here, but I've learned my lesson. Please, take me out of this place. But Jesus would just sadly shake his head and walk on with Mary saying, oh, what a shame. This certainly hurts me, but this is the choice that person has made. And there were all kind of very graphic, dark, pitiful, and heavy images in this book. And it just didn't resonate with me as being, again, something that would be from the divine spirit. It just struck me very, very wrong. I knew something wasn't right, but I decided to at least try to read a divine revelation of heaven. And it was very fundamentalist, very evangelical. The streets of gold, everybody's rich, everybody lives in a castle. God is this, long-bearded, white-bearded man with the crown of glory on his head and all this sort of thing. So again, I look at these kind of books and I say, I think that they are tall tales rather than actual divine revelations of heaven and hell. And again, the religious world is just filled with these kind of books and filled with these kind of testimonies. But now the interesting part about this is those who actually study the near-death experience and the deathbed vision say that it is less than 1 or 2% who actually have a hellish experience when they have a brush with death. And that most people, no matter what their faith, whether they believe or not believe, have a pretty positive experience. So in the statistics, those who study the near-death phenomenon say, well, either not as many people are going to this place called hell as many religionists report, or maybe there isn't such a place because the percentage is so low of people that actually see this during their experience. Now, I know some things in that statement may step on the toes of some religious folks and say, well, no, you're deceived, these researchers are deceived, you have to believe in this particular holy book or this particular God or this particular doctrine in order to get into heaven. But I would say this in summation. I believe there is an afterlife. I do, for the most part, follow the teachings of Jesus. I find them to be beyond their time. They're very revolutionary. They're very deep. You can read them over and over again and continue to get things out of them. They never get old. And I feel that there is something there that is timeless and true and very important for humanity. But I also think that it very well could be, as many people who have had near-death experiences say, that it's all about how we live our lives. It's about loving others, loving God, doing good, just being good people. I've also studied and read the Quran, and there are things in there that I agree with and that I find to be very interesting as well. And both the Bible and the Quran speak on, a person receiving their just reward for the things they've done in life when they left this world. So I'm not so sure that there's a magic bullet or a magic pill or a get-out-of-jail-free card just because we say, well, I'm this religion or I'm that religion or I follow this person or that person. Maybe the teachings in these books are merely vehicles and tools to help us live that more kind, loving, and decent life. Maybe this whole thing we call life, death, and the afterlife isn't so complicated after all. Maybe it's all just based on love. Maybe all these stories that are made up and claimed to be true, like Jesse Duplantis and John and Mary Baxter. Maybe they're stumbling blocks in our world, in our life, into our spirituality. Maybe they complicate the matter. Maybe they make us afraid and make us think, gee, it can't be that easy, could it? Just love others, love God, and be a good person, and I'll peacefully pass into this wonderful new dimension of life when I leave this place. I've always had the belief that if there be such a place as hell, that it would be for people who are really, 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 really evil. A soul that could not be reformed, even if it were to behold the face of God. That rather it would try to usurp and be God rather than to humble themselves and worship and love God. If there be such a place, I don't think it's for the average man and woman who makes the occasional mistakes, because we all make mistakes and none of us are perfect. We're all here doing the best we can. And I think if we do the best we can in love, in kindness, in gentleness, well, as the Bible would say, love covers a multitude of sins. So again, yes, I do believe that there is an afterlife. But I don't believe that some of these stories are true. And we have to remember that there are certainly charlatans and money grabbers in the religious and spiritual world, just as there are in the mainstream business world. And we have to weigh these things with a little bit of logic and common sense. I'm Paul James Caiden. I thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on the Spirit Side.